Get your ears wrapped around the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast. All the scoop you need to know from college basketball to the NBA and even March Madness. News of your rising stars. Topics on and off the hardwood. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast.
Into the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Here on the GSMC Podcast Network, I'm your host, Brice Lewis. We have a little bit of an All-Star Weekend preview. Talk about all things All-Star coming up this weekend. Obviously, the last games that were played on Wednesday and other things going from the week of basketball since the last time we were here. And, you know, we're going to talk about, just like I said, a lot of different things. We're gonna talk about obviously some news and notes around the league. We're also gonna talk about some stories, some turmoil within some certain organizations and other things like that. So as you know, we always keep everything here on the podcast pretty exclusive to everybody here in terms of just our transparency and my personal thoughts on all of these potential subjects and topics going into the future. So we're just gonna start off with some All-Star news coming out. Damian Lillard playing in their last game before the All-Star game, injured his groin and will be out for the All-Star break. He will not participate in the three-point competition or the All-Star game and has been replaced by Devin Booker. But Damian Lillard, just in case you didn't want to see some Dollar Dame, will, and I repeat, will be still doing his performance. So that being said, if you still want to see Damian Lillard or Dollar Dame, or Dame Dollar, perform live during the All-Star break, you will still see him. He may have a weak groin, but his lyrics strong. So, so he'll still be able to do that. Obviously, this is very disappointing, him getting hurt at this point in the season. Obviously, you know, I like to say this could be somewhat a cause of the fact that he's basically having to carry the entire Portland team right now on his back, and he's almost averaging 40 a game. Obviously, a historic stretch going into the break, but it feels like, you know, he's been wore out a lot because he's had to do a lot to be able to keep this team afloat, keep them competing for an 8th playoff spot, trying to potentially get into the spot, and you know, just trying to, like I said, trying to make the 8th spot in the Western Conference. Hopefully, by the time the break is over, he's back and playing again, because at least the thing about this a groin injury can linger, but it could be a short-term groin, and it's not like he's under any pressure to play anytime soon. So I believe they wouldn't play till maybe late next week. So we'll see where he is and how he feels going into that, not having to really play or anything like that. I'm sure he'll get treatment on it 24/7. I'm sure Portland has some of the finest doctors in all of the NBA. So we'll see if Damian Lillard doesn't miss a beat and can get back on the floor when the All-Star break is over with and they start this last half of the season and that true playoff push that's for every team unto that point. So we'll have to see what happens coming up with that. Obviously, like I said earlier, Devin Booker has now replaced Damian Lillard on the team as the new official player on Team LeBron for Damian Lillard, as he was drafted to Team LeBron. So they were just going to go ahead and replace on Team LeBron. But they've went ahead and replaced him. So, you know, obviously, you know, Devin Booker, a lot of people thought like was snubbed out of the All-Star game, averaging 26 points a game on a team. He felt like he was snubbed. A lot of people thought like he was snubbed, but now he's getting his just due, and he's able to now play in the All-Star game coming up. Kind of raises a question though. If you're a player who wasn't voted but subbed in because somebody got hurt, would you look at this All-Star appearance as just as valuable to you? Or would it be kind of a little tainted because it's not like, because in a way it's like you're not supposed to be here. And now you are here because, you know, someone got hurt. And obviously there was questions before Luka came back last night that he wasn't going to maybe be able to play in this game. And now he's going to be able to. And now, you know, with Damian Lillard going down, Devin Booker is going to be able to play in this game. He's going to be able to play at the highest level. He's going to be able to play at a level where he can showcase some stuff. I think him entering the 3-point competition also shakes some things up because, it makes you kind of wonder a little bit about if, is he going to become the new favorite potentially? Because we know how great of a shooter Devin Booker is. He's always been a great shooter coming out of Kentucky. And him now entering that contest might switch up, what people think. Obviously, a lot of people was favoring Damian Lillard going into this, and now he's gone. And now maybe people are going to prefer him and Trae Young. Obviously, Joe Harris, the returning champion's in there. There's a lot of good shooters that you potentially could have in that you think could potentially win it. It just really depends on what you think. But also at the same time, Devin Booker's going to be an all-star game. Hopefully he can make a case for himself. Maybe some added motivation thinking he should have been here the whole time. So there is that too. But like I said, we'll have to see what happens. Obviously, it's just sad news for Damian Lillard. Obviously, he's been a guy who's always come out every day and just, done and everything like that. So we'll have to see what happens. But also we have a report coming out of Philadelphia. Obviously, a lot of people have been talking about Philly, Ben Simmons, and Embiid not working. Some people think potentially the Philadelphia 76ers might trade one of the two players. There was a report coming out that the Sixers will look into trading Embiid if Ben and him cannot blend. Obviously, you would think probably this offseason, depending on how this next playoff run goes for them. Obviously, the 76ers are coming off probably their best game together against the LA Clippers in a win. So if they can play like that the whole rest of the season into the playoffs, they'll be a very hard team to beat. Plus, that might be able to keep them together. But if not, and they look very out of context, or it's just not blending right, it seems like the 76ers are willing and see that we have to look into maybe removing one of these guys. Obviously, Embiid's the one who's really the most controversial because he's the one who talks. He's the one who does the social media. He's the one who made the villain statement. He's the one who does all that. So I feel like you may want to move him where Ben doesn't say too much, but you can sense it with Ben. And, potentially make that move there. I don't know if they really want to make that move. I mean, you have two players of this caliber. You really don't want to make a move like this because you feel like you have two stars. And you really just wish it could work, but it's just playing styles just doesn't work. Because if Ben could shoot, this would work perfectly. But Ben can't shoot, so he needs to paint. Embiid needs to paint. That stuffs up the paint. Now, the 76ers have made some lineup changes, moving Al Horford out of the starting lineup. Because you got to think about, too, Horford's in the paint. Even though he can't stretch, he's in the paint. Embiid's in the paint. The Ben needs to paint. So they tried to go with a smaller lineup so they can get more athleticism out there. Maybe that could help potentially with those lineup potential issues. So it really just depends. I'm sure, Embiid, a lot of people feel like out of the two of them, Embiid's the most talented. So if you trade Embiid, I feel like you could probably get the most. And with the talent they have, I think you definitely want you a starting caliber player or a potential star back in return in a trade. One place I would not be surprised, maybe, even though this sounds like crazy, don't be surprised if the San Antonio Spurs are willing to trade LaMarcus Aldridge or DeMar DeRozan over to the 76ers for Embiid, because I think it would work. Because remember, LaMarcus Aldridge is really a jump shooting big man, and he's not as in the paint as Embiid. But at the same time, they can add him, and then maybe add a couple of shooters that San Antonio has. And then not only do you have a shooter, you still kind of have a second guy who can score the ball, like DeMarcus Aldridge. And then the team kind of runs through Ben Simmons and the shooters. Tobias Harris can also still be there and score the ball too. So it's not really like they'll be out of talent or they won't be able to compete, but you just don't know how high enough of a team they could be. But we're going to see in their first year with Ben if that happened. That's just a team I'm just throwing out there early. Because like I said, you really never know what teams are going to be interested. You don't know what teams are willing to give up. I can make a case, since he's an upgrade over most centers in the league, maybe you try to flip your star center for their center, and then maybe throw in some players. Obviously, Orlando potentially could do that. I mean, the Vucevic is a great center. That could potentially be a case. They don't really like Vucevic is a good center, but he's not a star center. Embiid's more of a star center, so he's one of those guys who could really elevate your team, it feels like, with the talent that he possesses. So that's the team also I think could potentially make him, should look into it potentially and have some assets. Maybe you give up Mo Bamba and Vucevic for Embiid, and if they say 76ers feel like they still got a front line, and it feels like they got a star. So we'll have to see what happens with all of that going into the future. But coming up next, AD and the Lakers pull off a great win in overtime against the Denver Nuggets. Where are these two teams headed in direction into the break? And the Nets snap the Raptors' 15-game winning streak. All that and more here on the podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about Damian Lillard missing the All-Star game with a groin injury he had suffered in the last game going into the All-Star break. Devin Booker has been selected to replace him in the three-point competition and in the All-Star game on Team LeBron. So obviously, I guess this is going to be Devin Booker's first All-Star appearance. So congratulations to him. And also, we talked about a report that the 76ers are, if Embiid and Simmons cannot blend, will explore trading Joel Embiid this offseason. So this definitely makes it very interesting to see what happens. It puts more eyes on, and puts much more eyes on the 76ers season going into the future. If they don't meet expectations, what potentially could happen because of it. So now we're going to get some more news and notes around the league, starting with some news that coming out of the Lakers and Denver Nuggets game. The Lakers won 120-116 in overtime. Anthony Davis hitting two clutch threes late to seal the game. It was probably one of the best games that you've seen on regular season TV all year. This had kind of a playoff atmosphere around it. Everybody came out and played their hardest. It was just a back and forth game. LA would make a run. Nuggets would make a run. It was what you would expect out of the first or second seeds in the Western Conference, and so on and so forth. Obviously, if you look at the two directions of the teams going into this game, if you look at the Nuggets, a lot of people don't think the Nuggets have enough because the Nuggets have a lot of good players, but they don't have some people feel like they don't have that star player. Like Joker is good, but some people don't think he is like that star player that can really carry you. Because he's going to have moments where he won't score well or he won't play well or he has that lapse. And so the next player up is Jamal Murray, but Jamal Murray even isn't always like that. So it's like, what do you really have on Denver consistently to know game in and game out you're going to get the best out of these two players and they're going to lead you to the promised land? Now, one of the things I've been on record of saying is I think that potentially Michael Porter Jr., currently out right now, he could be a key puzzle in this race, because he's the one player on their team that has star potential as well, outside of Joker and Jamal Murray. He has star potential. It's just he's been hurt. That's why he hasn't really had the ability to show it. But when he has played, he's played well because he's kind of like Ben Simmons basically. He's basically a Ben Simmons-ish player, so he has star potential. I think he's a slightly better shooter than Ben. Obviously, he's willing to take the jump shot, but obviously, he knows that his higher percentage and most of his betterness will happen in the paint. I think if he could get something going and they can establish him in the rotation, he stays healthy, that could be maybe an extra push that Denver has that when they go against a team, maybe potentially the Clippers or potentially against the Lakers, that they can go ahead and put their best foot forward and test those teams, push them to 6, potentially 7 games. Maybe even though a lot of people don't see it, potentially make one of the greatest upsets in NBA history and beat one of those guys. So it's just definitely a direction they could go in, but it just really depends. I think last night's game also showed how close they are, but how far they are. You may sit here and think, oh, Denver should have won last night's game, and they just couldn't get the job done. And that's why sometimes people feel they're too young, or mentally they're not there 100% yet. It really kind of just depends. It just really makes you wonder about what do you think about the situation going into it. I think there's plenty of time here for Denver to still figure out what they want to do, what's the best way to play to beat one of the top teams in the Western Conference, because they know they can beat every other team in this conference. The only other team, the 2 teams that people think they don't have a chance against are the LA teams, because everybody feels like they're head and shoulders above every Western Conference team. And so it's going to be important for them, depending on seeding and depending on what happens, for them to come out there, play their hardest, and just do some things that could potentially help them long term to potentially make that run that they want to make into the future, and maybe shock some people in the playoffs potentially. So there you go right down Denver. I think Denver has a good direction. They have a lot of young talent. They have a great front office and a great staff. I mean, it just really depends on who's going to be that guy who really gets them over the hump. Is it going to be Joker? Is it going to be Jamal Murray? Is it going to be Michael Porter Jr.? Is it Gary Harris going to play better? There's a lot of potential options there. There's a lot of what ifs with Denver, but I think once they figure that out, I think they'll be in a pretty good shape and pretty good to go going into the playoffs. Because like I said, if they go second seed right now, they'll play the Clippers in the second round. Obviously, that's the 2 through 6 is really a very fluid part of the Western Conference right now. So you really don't know who's going to be where, who's going to end up where in that picture. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens throughout the season. Obviously, the Lakers are still, looked at as like the best team in the Western Conference because they have the best record. They look like the best team, obviously record-wise. So, with LeBron at 82 of the potentially top 3 best players in the world, you feel like they have all the potential in the world to be just as dominant as any team in this league. And, that win against the Denver Nuggets kind of showed why they are favored in a lot of matchups and why they're going to be favored against Western Conference Finals at least, because LeBron's playing these games. AD's learning experience, but he has the talent to play in these games. Danny Green's playing these games. Rondo's playing these games. A lot of the players on the Lakers have played in these games. It's really only person who really hasn't played in those types of games is Anthony Davis. And he has the talent where you still expect him to dominate when the light is shown. And when the spotlight is on Anthony Davis, you expect him to still go out there and dominate. You expect him to go out there and play well. You expect him to go out there and show everybody why he chose the LA Lakers and why he is one of the premier big men in the league by far. Like really, you really go out there and you see that, you look for it, and it's showcased to you on a nightly basis by Anthony Davis. Obviously, I'm going to get into a report a little later about what an anonymous NBA exec said about them when it comes to the Clippers with the Lakers. But, overall, I think they have all the potential in the world to be just as good as any team. They want home field throughout. So, it's one of those types of things. We'll have to just see what happens, really. And lastly, the Brooklyn Nets snapped the Toronto Raptors' 15-game winning streak. Chris LeVert had a big game. Joe Harris had a big game as they snapped the Raptors' 15-game winning streak, which was the longest winning streak in franchise history in Toronto. So it was a great run. Obviously, it's crazy going into the All-Star break. That's when they get snapped. But Brooklyn just played one of their best games last night. And, they deserved to win that game because, they knew, when you got those teams like that who are coming in on a 15, 16-game winning streak, you always feel like they could potentially be more tired than most teams because they feel the pressure of trying to keep this winning streak up as long as possible. And also a team knows, they're winning 15 games, so we got to be up for this game. Because clearly if they win 15 games, they're one of the best teams in the conference. And if we beat them, it's going to make a statement for us that we snapped it. So I think it's something that, is great for Brooklyn. Obviously, about the Kyrie thing and everything like that. Obviously, Brooklyn hopes this win can help propel them back into the playoffs, coming out of a break, playing good basketball, and potentially getting to where they want to go, which is just, trying to make the playoffs, see how far they can go with Kyrie before they get Kevin Durant back next year. And really, you start to see Brooklyn as maybe a potential title contender when KD gets back into the lineup from his torn Achilles. Obviously, you've seen videos of KD working out, getting prepared, getting ready, so everybody's really seeing that, getting prepared for that. Everybody's excited for that, and so et cetera, and so forth. So, we'll just have to see what happens. I'm sure, obviously the Toronto Raptors have had a lot of fun recently with the fits they've been wearing. As Ibaka says, it's not drip, it's not style, it's not money, it's art. The scarf obviously is now becoming a trademark there. If you've seen the Instagram pictures, it's a very impressive. Only them, they can pull off the scarf. So it's very cool. But I think it's exciting that potentially they had this long winning streak and they did as well as they could, and now they don't have this pressure coming into it moving forward. But coming up next, we got some more news and notes around the league. We're going to talk about Luka Doncic scoring 30-plus coming back from his ankle injury. And also an anonymous NBA exec says there's no way the Lakers can beat the Clippers in a 7-game series. I'll break that down and more coming back after the break right here on the podcast. Stay tuned.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about other things around the league, like AD and the Lakers pulling off a great win in Denver last night. Obviously, one of the best games of the regular season on national television. That was the Lakers and the Denver Nuggets. And also, what two directions that team are heading going into the break, what's going on, what we think about them, what they need to do coming out of the break to maybe make that push or to improve their team. And also the Nets snapping the Raptors' 15-game winning streak last night. Obviously, the Raptors had that 15-game winning streak, which was the longest in franchise history. And, was just one of the things that made them look like they could potentially maybe still compete to defend their championship this year in the playoffs when it gets down to it. But the Nets spoiled that party by going ahead and breaking it before heading into the All-Star break. So congrats to the Brooklyn Nets on a great performance last night. So now we continue on. And also another person who came back from injury last night was Luka Doncic. Luka Doncic was hurt. I think he was out for 8 games with an ankle injury that he suffered. And he came back last night and dropped 30. And it just shows you how great he is as a player. Because, sometimes players, they get hurt and they come back from an injury. And, they got to ease into it. They got to get their feet back under them. They got to, They got to really work their way back into shape, work their way back into whatever. So they might come off a little slow at first. I mean, it wasn't the longest layoff in the world, but still a layoff nonetheless. And he came out there and competed at a high level right away. And dropped 30 as the Dallas Mavericks picked up a win. So, Luka is, like I said, is one of the best guards. He's going to be he's a starter on Team LeBron. He plays really well. He plays super well. And he's like I said, he's one of the best players. Luka's just a guy who, the way he plays is so advanced. He's so skilled. Obviously, when you come from overseas, they teach you a lot of fundamentals and skills in basketball instead of more of your athletic ability. Because a lot of people overseas aren't the most athletic in the world. It's just they're taught skills. Especially if you're talking about from Europe or any of the Euro leagues, Definitely. Remember, this man was playing against grown men at 16, 15. So he's been playing against some of the best competition for a while, and then getting to the league, he's used to playing against the type of men that he's played against, and now he's older, has a better body, and has more skill and talent. Now it works and it translates, and that's why you always have that one overseas player who can take the league by storm, because with all of that coming into one play, that can form a great player like a Luka Doncic, which has been shown on multiple occasions. You always have that one great guy, from Manu Ginobili to Dirk Nowitzki to Luka. I mean, and these are Euro guys, and we ain't even talk about like other guys like Giannis. He's a Greek guy. He's from Greece. There's not a lot of players that come out of Greece that are as good as Giannis is, and it's just also part of this game being so low, being a very global game, and that just provides opportunities all the time for potential guys to come back from overseas and get into the league and still be one of the better, if not one of the best teams in the world, with him as their main guy. So, it's very impressive to see what happens there, and so on and so forth. But now we're going to get to a report that was anonymous. Obviously, there's always, people always like to ask general managers, scouts, people within front offices, obviously, that you have connections to. People like to ask questions about certain players, certain situations, and see if they can get their opinion on them. Obviously, everything's always anonymous, because obviously, if something gets out that you said this about a player, you think this about a situation, everybody's going to know who you are. And if the situation ends up being for the best for the people involved and not for you, it makes you look bad, could cost you a job. So that's why a lot of the time it's always like, if you keep this anonymous, I'll tell you what you want to know. It's part of the media world and reporting. It's just sometimes you got to give up. You got to give confidentiality to get information that people want to know. So, and this is no other type of example than this situation. But an NBA exec was asked about the Clippers and Lakers in a 7-game series, and one NBA exec said that he believes that the Lakers have no shot, absolutely no way they can beat the Clippers. The Lakers can beat the Clippers in a 7-game series. And his main reason is citing they have no one who can play off LeBron. Obviously, this has been an issue that has been mentioned multiple times by multiple people. Because when LeBron leaves the floor, they don't really have a playmaker who can make plays outside of LeBron. That's why LeBron's the point guard in the first place. And Rajon Rondo hasn't really played that well so far, so a lot of people are kind of bailing on Rajon Rondo. But they just feel like against the Clippers team that has great defenders at every level and can score on the other end, how is it basically, without LeBron almost playing 48 a night, are the Clippers going to get enough production basically from everybody else to be able to end up beating the Clippers? Because the Clippers, the way they're formed, they have 5 players that can go get theirs and play good defense. Well, 4 technically. Lou Williams is not really known as a defender. He's more of just a scorer and an elite scorer. But they have 4 players who can get you buckets and play elite defense. And Marcus Morris, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, and Patrick Beverley from time to time can get you buckets too. Obviously, Montrezl Harrell, he's a sturdy guy, but he's a little undersized. So Anthony Davis still should have the mismatch against him. But Montrezl Harrell on the other end can also get buckets too. They look like, on paper, the more complete team that fits, because they have a lot of versatility at all positions, especially with the Marcus Morris trade. Their versatility has been increased. And so it makes people wonder about if a 7-game series happens, it feels like the Lakers need LeBron and AD to be them, or else they don't have a chance, where the Clippers can maybe have an off game from Kawhi, or have an off game from Paul George, or have an off game from Lou Williams, and still have enough to beat whoever they're playing, because they have a lot more of talent and diverse of talent around the way, where the Lakers, it feels like, the thing about the Lakers is that they have 2 guys who usually do the best all the time, and LeBron and AD, and they just need a 3rd guy to step up every game. But you don't know. People want it to be Kuzma, but obviously Kuzma still is trying to adjust to his role, coming off the bench and not being the 3rd, even though he's still a 3rd option, adjusting to coming off the bench, Obviously, if Danny Green can have one of his big playoff games, that's obviously going to help tremendously. There's plenty of things that can happen that can help perform and help different people out. I think it's interesting that you have an exec coming out and saying something like this. Because like I said, it makes you wonder what a lot of people think around the league. Even though you're worried about your own team, you do see what's around the league. You do have opinions. And some people may think, if I was in that position, we're not good enough to beat these guys. That's basically what he's saying, that anonymous exec. If this was my team and we had the Lakers and them was the Clippers, and we're not beating them, we don't have enough playmaking. That's why the Lakers obviously people were surprised they stayed held pat at the deadline. They were surprised. Obviously there was some disappointment that Darren Collison decided not to return. Like I said, they're having some preliminary talks with Dion Waiters, J.R. Smith. So potentially they're going to add somebody along the way. I think a lot of people would prefer Dion Waiters because he's more of a playmaking guard than J.R., where he's more of just a shooter. So it just really depends. But there's no guarantee that they're going to also sign one of those guys either. So you really don't know who they're going to add, or they're just going to go stand pat with Rondo and say, Rondo, you got to get us there, and we're going to need you to be playoff Rondo when the playoffs come around. So obviously that's going to be a very interesting situation for them going into the future of the offseason to see what happens. There's a lot of potential, a lot of talent there. It just depends on everything going on. Like I said, Clippers are one of probably the deepest teams in the entire NBA, which is why they're one of the most hardest teams to beat. It's like sometimes with these top heavy teams, they're top heavy, and then like literally when they go and stretch the bench, it's like, okay, you have a mismatch, you have an advantage, you can take advantage of them there. Where with the Clippers, they have a good starting lineup and they have a good bench. So really, if you look at the starting lineup, Marcus Morris, Kawhi, Paul George, Patrick Bev, and then you go to the bench, Lou Williams and Montrez. Like that's not like, you're not gonna look at this and say, oh, we can take advantage of this lineup. Like they can still beat you with any lineup, and that's what makes them such a complete team in a lot of people's minds. It's also one of the better defensive teams in the NBA. And why, even though everything's happening with the low management with Kawhi, they still expect him to be just in it just as much as any other team when it's all said and done, when it ends up coming to the end of the season. So that's my thoughts on that. But coming up next, we're going to talk about some Kings drama within the organization, and some within the Knicks organization are pushing to have Mike Miller, the current interim head coach, Mike Miller, to stay as the head coach next year for the New York Knicks. Stay tuned.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment, we talked about some news and notes around the league, like an anonymous NBA exec saying that the Lakers can't beat the Clippers in a 7-game series because they don't have a playmaker outside of LeBron, and the Clippers are just too deep. Obviously, I gave my breakdown and my thoughts on that. I also talked about how Luka Doncic came back from an ankle injury and dropped 30, just showing the greatness of Luka Doncic, always at top of his game, even coming back from injury, just showing why he deserved to make the All-Star game going into the break, and why he is going to be a star, especially a foreign star or an international star for years to come in the NBA. So now we're going to get into some reports coming from organizations here, and we're going to talk about the Kings. The Kings obviously have had a disappointing year, especially after last year, almost making the playoffs, having a lot of young talent like Buddy Hield, De'Aaron Fox, a lot of other guys, and it's just not working right now. There's frustration within the organization with the team's performance and why they haven't done as well as that maybe the front office thought they should have done. The Sacramento Kings right now are 6 games out of the Western Conference, and the owner, Vivek Radhaimov, I don't know if I said that wrong. If I said that right, if I said that wrong, I apologize. It's hard saying it. Is reportedly growing frustrated and impatient. So apparently he has a group chat with the GM, the coach, the assistant general manager, and the chief operating manager. And he's been communicating in that group chat all season long through group text to express his displeasure for what's their team's performance. Obviously, he's talked to everybody independently. He's texted in the group chat. Right now they're saying there is no imminent sign that they expect to make any changes, but obviously, I feel like it's kind of weird in a way. It makes you wonder maybe other teams have it, but, your owner puts you in a group chat just to complain, oh, we should be better than this. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And it makes you, I feel like there could be more pressure. Because think about if you lose a game you should have won, and then your owner going to text you talking about what happened tonight, what was that? And I think that can obviously add stress and pressure to the coaching staff, to the front office, because everybody's involved in this group chat. So, but obviously, if things continue to be the same and the Kings continue to struggle moving forward, I'm sure there will be changes that potentially will be made by the owner of the Kings. The Kings are a very dysfunctional franchise. David Yeager got the most out of these guys, and they got rid of him because they didn't have the same view on certain things. And yet they brought Luke Walton, who once was in a situation where he was coaching young players, couldn't get the best out of them, comes to this situation to hopefully get the best out of their young players, still can't get the best out of them. And it's just not working. I talked about this earlier this year about how maybe the issue isn't the players, it's Luke Walton. Maybe Luke Walton's just not as good of a coach as people want him to be because he's the son of the great of his dad, a famous NBA player and a famous coach himself. And Mark Walton. So, it's something that, I've always talked about. But obviously, there's been issues all year with the franchise. Obviously, one issue was with Buddy Hield. Buddy Hield might request a trade this offseason because he was benched earlier this season because Luke Walton felt like that was the best move. Buddy Hield was struggling at that time. And ever since he's been on the bench, Buddy Hield has had one of his best games. So obviously has had some of his better games. So obviously he's probably expecting to get back into the starting lineup because he knows you're paying me too much to be a bench guy. And if he doesn't get his starting job back, he could request a trade, and that would not do good for this young core that they have in Sacramento if one of their key players or key cogs wants out because of coaching or front office issues. Obviously, a lot of the owner's frustration has been pointed at Walton. And, a lot of ownership officials have reportedly offered a sharp assessment of Walton's performance throughout the season. And the group text reportedly features many complaints regarding the coaching. Obviously, this was kind of, like I said, this is kind of an issue I remember hearing last year with Dave Yeager. Oh, why aren't we playing Marvin Bagley more? Stuff like that. It's kind of the same thing here, where now it's just like, well, why did we make this coaching decision? Why did we make that coaching decision? Why would you make this coaching decision? Remember, in LA, there was a lot of people who was indifferent about Luke Walton's coaching. They were like, why did he make this decision? Why did he make that decision? Why does he pull? Obviously, Lonzo Ball was a big case of that. People thought that Luke didn't want Lonzo to succeed because he'll play him 6 minutes and then send him all the way to the end of the second, then play him again. And his rotations was weird and it just wasn't working. And people felt like Lonzo was the biggest affected guy by this, that maybe he wasn't behind Lonzo, and that's why he did what he did. But even here with the Kings, they're having some issues. The Kings have a lot of impressive young talent. That's something you cannot forget. They have De'Aaron Fox. Harrison Barnes has played well there. Boban Bogdanovic, obviously, he's been a great addition. Young player, you know what I'm saying? He's a great 3 shooter. He's a great sniper. Marvin Bagley, and it just hasn't led to the on-court success they thought they would have had, and I think that's very frustrating for any organization thinking that you have all this young talent. Think about young talent. You see it with the Hawks, you see it with the Pelicans, you see it with a lot of teams. You have a lot of young stars or young talent that you think could be stars, but you're not seeing it resulting in wins, so you're kind of frustrated, like, well, what's going on? Why are we not playing better than we should? Because you always feel like if you put the right coach with these guys and get the max out of them, they could be able to compete with the best of them, and they don't, and so you're trying to figure out what's going on, who's to blame, who should be fired, things like that. Obviously, you're trying to figure out what's gone wrong, who do we need to get rid of? It's just a big question all over the place. But I mean, listen, the Kings are still in the playoff position, so they can still make it. They can still get there. So it's not like they're completely out of it. Like I said, Hiltz had big performances, a 42 performance and a 31 point performance too. And obviously they're going to need more from him if they're going to become a playoff factor, because you're going to need all your young guys to be at the forefront of this. Now, we don't know if them missing the playoffs is going to result in anything, but obviously the regression and potentially the record in this season could potentially get him and this coaching staff fired, Luke Walton and them, and obviously that would just be another failed thing. It's failed to do a lot of things there. So we'll have to see what happens going into the future. Like I said, this team is underachieved massively, even though there has been some injuries, and a lot of people weren't really happy about the David Yeager firing. We'll have to see what happens. I mean, it would be kind of bad that you fire Yeager after last year, and you fire Luke after this year. It just shows an unstable franchise, which has always been the issue with the Kings, is they've always been viewed as a very unstable franchise, which is why some people are not always trying to play for or coach for the Knicks, because they know how just out of the blue things can change with, the franchise in general. But also, we have another organizational report out of the New York Knicks. Obviously, the New York Knicks have been under a lot of scrutiny this year, firing the president, firing the GM, firing the head coach. I mean, they basically cleaned house during the season. While the season is going on, we just got to the All-Star break, and they fired their GM and head coach. And they just hired a new president. I mean, it's almost like they're doing the off-season in season. But one thing that may be a positive is the Knicks have played better, even though they're just bad. So I mean, there's nothing you can do. But they have played better. They've played harder. They've done some things well under new head coach Mike Miller, who has been the replacement head coach after David Fizdale was fired earlier this year, and he has played pretty decently. And I think, he's coached very decently, and a lot of people within the organization are kind of pushing to potentially keep him as the head coach next year with the Knicks. And, sometimes the only thing about these these interim positions is that if you can get more out of the team and it looks like they're playing harder and they're doing better, it can definitely help your case to potentially keep the job going into next year. Now, I'm sure a lot of people in New York are kind of like, do we want to do that? I mean, do we want to keep him? Do we want to try to get a splash at head coach? I will have to see. I think that, you want to go with what the players know. And if the players have responded better under him, I can see why you would keep him around, because you don't want to go with whatever is the big splash ticket. Well, we're just bringing this splash head coach, and then he'll play better, and then it just may not work again, and you're back in the same situation where you're firing them after like a year or a year and a half, and it makes you look more as a dysfunctional franchise. But yeah, so that's what's happening coming out of the Knicks organization. But coming up next, I'm going to give you obviously some college basketball. We're going to talk about the big matchups this weekend in college basketball. And if time permits, we will also give a talk about the net rankings in college basketball right here on the podcast. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. Last segment we talked about the drama happening in the Knicks organization. What's going on with the Knicks? We did talk about the Knicks. We talked about them pushing to potentially keep head coach Mike Miller, who's been the interim head coach since David Fizdale's firing, as some people like him and think he's going to get the most out of this team, and they've played better underneath him, even though they've been blown out a lot just because the team's not that good this season. But they have played better, and that's what you want to see, progression as a coach and as a team. And also, the Kings have drama within their organization, as the owner has been very vocal to everybody about how he's disappointed with how the team has underachieved, and has been very focused on Luke Walton and the coaching decisions that have been made throughout the year and all of that too. So obviously something to keep up with, seeing how their seasons continue on after this All-Star break. Now I'm going to give you the rundown with some of the big games in college football, basketball this week. Obviously, I like to let y'all know, put an ear out for some of the bigger games to keep an eye on. And I'll let you know my thoughts and opinions on those games. First big game, we have a couple of big Thursday games. Obviously, or Colorado and Oregon. I'm going to go with Colorado in this game because, Colorado, I think just looks like they're focused. They're 19-5. Oregon is 18-6. Playing at a high level. Both teams are 7-3 in their last 10. Colorado's on a 3-game winning streak after Oregon has lost 2 straight, 2 especially at home. Oregon's playing some of their worst basketball right now, but they can bounce back if they can get a win over the Colorado Buffs, who's playing some of their best basketball right now. Which obviously, as any team who's in this league, you always want to get you play your best basketball, but you have those stretches where you sometimes don't got it sometimes, and you get a couple of losses, but you're just all about bouncing back, and that's how it makes you a good team. Now we're going into the Saturday games. Obviously, a big game, Oklahoma and Kansas. Big game in the Big 10. Actually, Big 12, my bad. Kansas has won 9 straight. They're 9-1 in their last 10. Oklahoma is 5-5 in their last 10. Basically for the most part, Oklahoma's on a 2-game winning streak though. KU is 12-1 at home this season, so they're one of the best home teams in the country. As Oklahoma's only 5-6 on the road. It looks like this could be an easy win for Kansas, but this is an upset alert game for me. I think Oklahoma, they're not a bad team. They're 16-8 on the season. They could potentially, maybe make something happen, potentially, and get an upset and create some chaos within the Big 12. Another big game to look out for this week, Kentucky and Ole Miss. Another upset game for me. Kentucky is 14-2 at home this season. They're on a 3-game winning streak, 8-2 in their last 10. Ole Miss obviously hasn't played their best, but they are on a 3-game winning streak. They are coming in here winning some games. They're 2-7 on the road, though. And they're very challenged offensively, as they only average 69.8 points a game, which is 225th in the nation, where Kentucky is 73rd in the nation at 75 points a game. So, obviously, college is so many teams, though. It's like, there may be 30 teams that average 69, but it's just with the point decimal, it's like, that's going to determine that can drop you about 60 spots just because of that point decimal. So, it's kind of curve a little bit, but, you got to see what happens. Big game also with Butler and Georgetown. Butler bouncing back after losing 2 straight, winning. They're 5-5 in the last 10. Georgetown 4-6. Georgetown hasn't had the season they wanted to have so far, but beating Butler can definitely help their resume. Giving them a chance to potentially, get back into the potential on the bubble talk when the tournament's coming up. We're only a month away from the tournament selection, so this is really where a lot of teams have to really step up and really get these key wins to really solidify themselves in the bubble when the community's making the decision who should be in and who shouldn't. Butler's been offensively challenged this season, only averaging 68.8 points a game, and their last loss, they only scored 47. So Butler has had their challenges offensively, but if they can bounce back in this game against Georgetown, that's going to be key for them. LSU, Alabama. LSU coming off their loss, but they bounced back with their last game winning. They're 8-2 in their last 10. Alabama's 5-5 in their last game, but they're 10-4 at home. So, and LSU's 5-4 on the road. So this is going to be a very interesting matchup. It's going to be at Alabama. Alabama has played well in a lot of these games against tough opponents. They just haven't been able to pull it out. Alabama is one of the best offensive teams in the country. They're second in the country with averaging 83 points a game. LSU is 10th in the country with 80 points a game. This is some of the highest scoring teams in D1 basketball. So obviously this could be potentially a high scoring game. And but I'm sure LSU's going to play some lockdown defense and make some plays. The only thing about LSU is they've had this issue of getting leads and then losing them late. So even if the LSU's up by 20, the game isn't over the way they've played this season. All it takes is a run, and then it will be a close game to end it. Next big game, obviously the biggest game of the weekend, is going to be Baylor and West Virginia, number 1 versus number 14. West Virginia is coming in here on a 2-game losing streak, where Baylor has won 21 straight. They're the hottest team in the country, and they just look amazing right now. West Virginia is one of the better defensive teams in the country, but they're going to have their work cut out for them because Baylor's going to be at Baylor Waco. The Farrell Center is going to be packed and rocking. And, obviously Baylor's been number 1 for the longest of any number 1 team all season long. So Baylor has definitely came out this season and looked like the most complete team in all of college basketball, and they're just continuing it if they win this and eventually win. So, and so on and so forth. But moving forward, another big game, Houston and SMU. Houston's 20-5 on the season. SMU is 17-6 on the season. SMU is one of the best home teams in the country, 13-1 at home, but Houston is one of the better road teams at 9-3 on the road. Both teams are playing some of their better basketball. Houston's coming in on a 3-game winning streak, 8-2 in their last 10. SMU 6-4 in their last 10. They've already, once this year, Houston won the first game, but now this is going to be at SMU, so we'll see how this game goes. Obviously, this game is going to come down to just, who's going to play the best defense in this game. Obviously, SMU is one of the best passing teams in the country, at 10th all in the country, where Houston's 142nd. But the only one Houston has the advantage is it's also one of the better rebounding teams in the country, too. So, a lot of things happen with that. So I obviously want to tune into that game on ESPNU. Another big game, Maryland and Michigan State. Obviously, Michigan State has not played to what a lot of people have expected out of them, and that has hurt them. This will be a good win if they can upset Maryland. Maryland is coming in hot right now, 7 in a row, 8-2 in their last 10. If Michigan State can get this win, especially after that disappointing loss Michigan State had to Michigan last weekend, this can really get some momentum and some confidence back into the team, back into the staff, that they can compete with better teams in the country, and that they're not going to be going into the tournament looking like a quick out. They'll be able to actually stay and compete at the highest level against some of the best competition potentially out there all around in all of college basketball and Division I basketball and everything like that. And then obviously going to any games on Sunday. Obviously big game. Obviously we got to keep up with San Diego State. Still continuing their undefeated ride. Obviously, 25-0, winning streak of 25, 10-0 in the last 10, 11-0 on the road. Going against the Boise State Broncos, 17-9 on the season, 13-2 at home. So this could be a game, probably one of their toughest games they've had to play all year against Boise State. San Diego State, they're second in point differential with 17 a game. So when they beat you, they blow you out. And, they're 20 in assists. So they do that. So clearly, offensively, they're one of the better teams in the country, even though Boise State is ranked at a better points per game than them. I think obviously this game is going to come down to who's going to play the best college basketball, and it's just always a story to keep up to see if this team could potentially finish the season undefeated. And last game we're going to look at is Oregon and Utah. Oregon trying to bounce back after losing 2 straight. They're 12 at home, at home though. They're one of the best teams trying to bounce back in the country. Obviously trying to improve their stock going into the NCAA tournament. Utah is not a slouch. They are not that great on the road, but they are definitely not a slouch. You don't want to sleep on them. You don't want to think that you could just walk in here and beat them easily. If you do, you're going to get upset again, and Oregon fans are going to get a little irritated. So gotta make sure you come out there and take care of business if you're Oregon. Right, we didn't have enough time to get to the net rankings, but don't worry. We're always going to bring it back to you next week. But coming up next, we're going to talk about the All-Star event predictions. We're going to talk about who I think is going to win the dunk, 3-point, rising star, who I think might be MVP, skills challenge, etc., etc. All that and more right here on the podcast.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Basketball Podcast. As I said, we talked about all things college basketball. I talked about all the big games you should look out for, why you should look out for those games, the biggest matchups in college basketball. This is a basketball podcast. We want to talk about all things basketball. We talk about the college game. So, obviously, when the March Madness picks up, I will surely talk more about March Madness, just because obviously that's a big time in basketball for all college basketball fans. But like I said, till then, because honestly, every game in March Madness is a must-see game because it's an elimination game. So, obviously that's going to be an exciting time when that comes around. But until then, I'm just going to, like I said, give you the biggest updates on the latest games like I did and go from there. So we'll have to see what happens going up next. But right now, we're going to get into my thoughts and predictions on who I think is going to either be the MVP or win said all-star events and challenges right here on this podcast. And we're going to start with the Rising Stars Challenge. Obviously, these are the 1 and 2 year guys, that are up and coming in this league. Obviously, on the USA roster, we'll break it down. We have Miles Bridges from the Charlotte Hornets, Devontae Graham, who's had a breakout season also on the Charlotte Hornets, Colin Sexton from Cleveland, Jaren Jackson Jr. from the Memphis Grizzlies, John Morant from the Memphis Grizzlies, Kendrick Nunn from Miami, Eric Pascal from Golden State, PJ Washington from Charlotte, Zion from New Orleans, and Trae Young from Atlanta. On the world roster, we have Nickeil Alexander-Walker from New Orleans, DeAndre Ayton from the Phoenix Suns, RJ Barrett from the New York Knicks, Brandon Clark from the Memphis Grizzlies. So that's about 3 Memphis Grizzlies in the game. A lot of young talent, as you can tell. Luka Doncic from Dallas, Sage Gilgeous-Alexander from Oklahoma City, Rue Machma from Washington. He's from China, so obviously it's a little bit harder to say his name. And I am not even going to attempt this name. His name is SIV, I guess Sly, from Detroit. I'm not even about to attempt that. I can't. And Josh Kenobi, from Minnesota, obviously with Morris Wagner and Nicolo Milic from Washington and New Orleans. I think that in this game, Trae Young has a great chance to be the MVP of this game, or Zion. I expect, honestly, on the U.S. roster, I expect the 3 potential MVPs to be John Morant, Zion Williamson, and Trae Young. From the world roster, I would probably go with Luka, maybe DeAndre Ayton, and dark horse Gilgeous-Alexander. It's a lot. I mean, the U.S. team looks stacked, honestly. I think this could be a 50-win team in the NBA if you put them together. I know that sounds crazy because they have no big man. Well, Miles Bridges, but, who needs big man? Well, Eric Pascal could be a big man a little bit. He is Zion if you need him to. Honestly, the world roster has more of like a taller. Like all I think about with the world roster, everybody's tall. Even Luka's like 6'9". So height wise, the world has the advantage. US wise, I think they have in terms of skill. I think like I said, my MVP is probably going to either be John Morant, Zion, or Trae. If it was from the world, it'd probably be Luka. And then, like I said, either DeAndre Ayton or maybe Gilgeous-Alexander. Now we're going to go to the skills challenge. The bracket for the skills challenge is Patrick Beverley from the Los Angeles Clippers, Sabonis from the Indiana Pacers, Chris Middleton from the Milwaukee Bucks, Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics, Bam Adebayo from Miami Heat, Spencer Dinwiddie from the Brooklyn Nets, Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the Oklahoma City Thunder. I'm going to go with Jason Tatum. I think Jason Tatum's going to win this. I think if you're looking at forwards, I think Jason Tatum will win. I think he'll win this. If you're looking at guards, I'll go with Spencer Dinwiddie. I think those are my two selections. If I wanted to go with who I think will win the skills challenge, it's a great matchups this year. Great people out here. Great talent. And you can't sleep on it. I think this is going to be a very entertaining. Skills challenge it's never been hyped up like the dunk or the 3-point, but it's always a great start. It's a great appetizer. You know, when you go get a meal and, there's that appetizer you get to really warm you up, and it's just like, obviously you ain't going there just for the appetizer, but it's a great start to the meal. The skills challenge has always just been a perfect start to an all-star event, in my opinion. And I think that's what makes it so good. But those are my guys I'm predicting to win that. The 3-point competition, obviously, this is some of the best 3-point shooters in the country, in the nation, in the world. The competitors for this is Devontae Graham from the Charlotte Hornets, Zach LaVine from the Chicago Bulls, Duncan Robinson, Dark Horse from the Miami Heat, Trae Young from the Hawks, Buddy Hield from the Kings, Davis Bertans from the Wizards, Joe Harris, the defending 3-point competition champion from the Brooklyn Nets, and obviously Damian Lillard was supposed to be in here, now Devin Booker. If I had to go with who I think was going to win, I would either go with Trae or I would go with David Bertans. David Bertans is one of the best shooters in the league you've never heard of because he plays on Washington, but he can shoot the lights out. Obviously, my dark horse would probably be Devin Booker because, like I said, Devin Booker may have something to prove. He's like, oh, y'all didn't vote me into this, so I'm going to prove why I belong here. So don't be surprised if he has one of his better games because we know how hot Devin Booker can potentially get. Devin Booker can become one of the hottest players in the league. So, I think that's going to be interesting. There's really a lot of great guys out here, man. This 3-point competition, a lot of people consider better than the dunk contest, just because the dunk contest has been on a downhill climb in a lot of people's mind. So, some people may consider the 3-point competition the new big event to see, and because of the talent that you see and the shooting that you see in the league nowadays with the 3-point shooting, that has just evolutionized the game. And then the slam dunk contest, obviously for the most explosive dunkers in the game today. We have the return of Superman Dwight Howard in this dunk contest. Derrick Jones Jr., we've seen all the dunks he's had during the course of the season. Aaron Gordon, who had that great classics dunk contest, a lot of people see the last great dunk contest with Zach LaVine, and Patrick Covington, who a lot of people were like, oh, who is he? He can dunk, and he's going to make a name for himself if he shows out in this game. I'm going to go with Aaron Gordon because I think Aaron Gordon obviously felt like he should have won the dunk contest last time. And I think he's going to come back and play. It's basically, I'm going with what we know. Dwight Howard, we don't know. I mean, Dwight Howard's older, but he probably feels like he can still dunk at an explosive level. He's in the best shape of his life. Derrick Jones Jr., I would not. He's my dark horse in this. I feel like sometimes guys who have a lot of hype because of all the dunks they have during the season, when it comes to a contest, they just don't do it as well, because I think it's different just dunking on somebody or during a game than just having to, okay, let me just make up something out of the blue with the ball and do a trick with it and dunk. And obviously Pat Connaughton, I'm not saying that he can't do it, but, that's just who I feel comfortable with. But if Connaughton does it, hey, man, all the world to him. And then the All-Star game. From the Eastern Conference All-Stars, we have Kemba from the Boston, Trae from Atlanta, Kyle Lowry from Toronto, Ben Simmons from the 76ers, Giannis Antetokounmpo from the Milwaukee Bucks, Pascal Siakam from the Toronto Raptors, Joel Embiid from the 76ers, Jimmy Butler from the Miami Heat, Bam Adebayo from the Miami Heat, Chris Middleton from the Milwaukee Bucks, Sabonis from the Pacers, and Jason Tatum from the Boston Celtics. On the Western All-Star side of it, Luka Doncic from the Dallas Mavericks, James Harden from the Houston Rockets, Damian Lillard from the Portland Trail Blazers, Russell Westbrook from the Houston Rockets, Donovan Mitchell from the Utah Jazz, Chris Paul from the Oklahoma City Thunder, LeBron James from the LA Lakers, Anthony Davis from the LA Lakers, Kawhi Leonard from the LA Clippers, Nikola Jokic from the Denver Nuggets, Brandon Ingram from the New Orleans Pelicans, and Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz. If I had to pick an MVP of the East wins, I think that Jimmy Butler is a guy who could really steal the show. I think he might be a little bit more aggressive with the ball. I don't want to go with anybody obvious like a Giannis or a Trey or maybe even a Kemba. Ben Simmons, since they ain't going to play no defense in this game, can win it. You never know. But I'm going to go with Jimmy Butler on the East if they win. On the Western side of it, I'll probably go with, I'm going to go either with maybe Devin Booker since he's replacing Damian, maybe Donovan Mitchell. It's always the guys that you don't expect or the guys who aren't the biggest names that usually win it because they take these games maybe slightly more seriously potentially, but that's who I got in the Western if they win the game. And that was my predictions for the All-Star Weekend coming up. Have a great All-Star Weekend, guys. This was the GSMC Basketball Podcast. I am your host, Brice Lewis. Don't forget to subscribe, and please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you, and have a wonderful day. Enjoy basketball this weekend, and hopefully these contests and competitions will be everything we want and more. Brice signing out.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Basketball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.